I'm Katie Cornelius with BAP, and I'm here to introduce Rick Lechman. He's going to do corporate fraud. He is the corporate controller for Power Motive Corporation, who competes with Caterpillar and John Deere on non-farm heavy equipment. And his actual title is Manager of Finance, Accounting, and Information Technology. Quite a mouthful, as he says. So let's all give a warm welcome to Rick Lechman.
I don't know if I'm worthy of an applause, but a little background on myself. I'm a UNC grad. I'm originally from Sterling. Came to UNC straight out of high school back in '93. It feels like a lifetime ago. Played baseball up here for 3 years. Enjoyed every minute of my college life. Pretty much really enjoyed it. Got out of school and I went straight into public accounting. I worked for McGladrey & Pullen for a couple years. Realized pretty fast I wasn't a public accountant, and looked for an opportunity in private sector, and I was able to hire on with Johnson & Johnson. That's the baby powder company out of Jersey. Through Johnson & Johnson, we worked on, we were not product-based, we were service-based, and we were responsible for developing and managing outpatient surgery centers across the country and into the United Kingdom. At J&J, I was responsible for all the development, all the day-to-day accounting, the management, being a consultant, wide gamut of responsibilities. While I was at J&J, I actually started my master's program at Regis. They would not pay for my CPA license and review course, so I decided I'd take their money and get a master's. And they realized how much money they were spending on me, so about a year into that, they decided they'd pay for the exam. I took it and passed it. So I am a CPA, been a CPA for pushing 10 years now. And stayed at J&J with actually a couple other UNC grads for about 8 years. And the model that we were doing was pretty much a replicated model. It was very challenging up front, but once you mastered the model, it didn't change a lot. So I was kind of burned out. And I started looking for an opportunity, and actually through Ron Reed over here at UNC, I was able to get an opportunity at Power Motive about 3 years ago now. So that's kind of how I got to where I'm at. When I hired on at Power Motive, I was hired on as corporate controller. I was responsible for financial reporting, regulatory things like taxes, audits, anything we might have to do with the federal government, those sorts of things. And I was really on a 5-year plan. They hired me because their CFO was kind of looking to wind down his career and backfill and get some bench strength, and so I was really hired on a 5-year plan to walk into his shoes, and he would retire and kind of walk off into the sunset. Little did I know that that would turn into a 1-year plan. So what Alan and Ron have asked me to do is just come and speak about my experiences with corporate fraud and the ethical dilemmas that it surrounds it. And in my short career, I've had way too many experiences with it, and I can tell you that none of them end good. My first experience was at J&J. While I was at J&J, I was only out for a couple of years, so I was mentioning to the other class that you come out of school and you may not grasp everything. For me, it was a year or two, and the light just kind of clicked, and everything just kind of opened up, and I understood how everything flowed and everything made sense. And so I really wasn't sure what we were looking at, but what happened at J&J is we had an administrator. All of our surgery centers were across the country, but the administrator was our employee. So he was my friend. He was a colleague of mine, and what he was doing was he was taking their corporate credit card and he was paying for things such as his kid's school. He was paying for a car. He was paying for a trip, and he wasn't just going to Disneyland. He was going to Hawaii. He was going to Mexico. He was doing fancy things. But how he was concealing it, and we didn't catch it for years, was he would charge it. He was responsible for coding his own bills. So he would lose the statement. Okay, so the next month it was a balance forward. And then he would code that balance forward and split it up to 100 different accounts. So when you're reviewing a financial statement, you're looking for discrepancies and problems, you're never going to see something that small in accounts that are massive. We never saw it. Well, we had some turnover, and we had actually a 1 year, I think it was 1 or 2 year accountant straight out of school, just started questioning. It just didn't look right. And we started looking into it, and we actually got the statements direct from American Express. We managed it, and over about a 4 or 5 month period, we found that he had paid for school, private schooling for his kids. We found that he did pay for a car and pay for trips. Needless to say, we had to fire him. They fired him on the spot. They had to because the fraud was so massive that for us to collect insurance money, we had to fire him and file a lawsuit against him or charges against him. So that person has a felony on their record. That person walked away from a $100,000 a year job, and pretty much that felony will follow him for every job, no matter if he's in that same industry or not, for the rest of his life. So flat out ruined his career, and this guy was probably in his 40s. So he's got a long career still to work, so his life's pretty much over in that regard. Like I told you, after about 8 years, I just kind of got burned out at J&J, and I got the opportunity at Power Motive. And when I walked into Power Motive, this one's really why I really wanted to talk to you about, and probably the main reason why I've been asked to speak to you. But maybe 6 months into my role at Power Motive, again, corporate controller, we had to go through our first audit. And that was my responsibility. And I'm sitting here trying to go through all the reconciliations and all the documents that I have to give to our auditors so they can see that we're doing the right things. And I came across an employee account receivable. And that's not abnormal. You'll see that a lot. We have a lot of that because we have a lot of mechanics. So they need boots, they need shoes, and uniforms. And so we'll give them the money. We'll take it out of their paycheck over the next year or something like that. So we're talking small dollars. But all of a sudden I've got one that's $90,000 sitting over here. And it's got my boss's name on it, CFO. And not that there's anything wrong with that. You can have a receivable, but I just needed the documentation. There's no documentation on this. And when I went back and looked at it, I was finding that it built over time. It wasn't just here's a loan, from the company. Okay. First off, there was no interest charged on that loan, so that was my first question. And again, I didn't know a lot about the tax law, but I was concerned that there might be a taxable event there because we're giving him free interest, no payment terms. And so we started looking at it, and we found that he had the controls and the power that he could do a check request to himself, and he would sign the check. Coded it to this account, which isn't necessarily wrong, but very poor internal controls. Well, we kind of watched that, and it just grew. It never went down, and what you guys will find out when you go out, because of Sarbanes-Oxley and some other regulatory things that have come down, at the completion of every audit, I call it a nastygram. Your auditors are required to give an assessment of controls and where you're good and where you're bad, and the language in it really makes you look incompetent. And I was really fretting this report when it came out. Basically what it means is one journal entry is a weakness. Okay, if you have to make a journal entry, it's a weakness. And there's differences in levels of weakness. And so I'm fretting this, and our auditors basically said, we want to talk to me and my president, my CEO, not the CFO, when they presented this. And they said, listen, in that meeting, they said, we're doing everything we're supposed to. I'm doing a good job, no matter what the language says. But you've got this receivable. You need to monitor it. So we started looking at this receivable over time. My CEO and president asked my CFO to take care of it this year. Get rid of it. This was a couple years ago, but get rid of it within the next calendar year. And he agreed. He understood it was a problem, and he shouldn't have been doing it. And I started watching this over time, and we had a couple of accountants looking at it, but the balance started decreasing. This is a guy that was making probably $250,000 a year with all of his bonuses and whatnot, and it was decreasing over time. And he bought it down probably $20,000, $30,000. And so everything seems to be working fine. Well, then the economy hits. Everything falls off the charts. Pretty much the worst economy in our lifetimes, and probably, hopefully, ever will be. But we had to downsize. We started being forced to lay people off. Our business size down 50%. We lost some accountants. Well, one of the accountants we lost was the accountant that was reconciling all the accounts for my CFO. Well, we're already strapped for what we can do, so who do you suppose took over those accounts? My CFO did. So now he's not only able to write a check, sign the check, he's also reconciling his own accounts. All these stuff is bad internal control. But again, we're watching this. So what was happening that is he had for 6 months bought this receivable down like he was supposed to. But then we're also searching on his name through all of our accounts, and I started seeing the checks come back and being put in another account. Okay? So again, he hasn't stolen anything, but he has the appearance that he's buying his debt down over here, but he's building it up over here in another account, an account that he controls. Okay, again, not fraud yet. So we watch it another 3 or 4 months, and all of a sudden a journal entry appears in that account, and what he's done is he has written off a portion of his debt out of this account that he owes the company, and wrote it off to cost of sales. Okay, $2,000–3,000. Problem with that is our cost of sales are probably $100 million. So how are we going to find $2,000–3,000 in that? Never would have found it. The only way we found it was we had been monitoring this account for 6, 7, 8 months. Well, at that point in time, I'm faced with now an ethical dilemma, because he's perpetuated fraud. He's stolen from the company. He's a criminal, in my opinion. Just wrote that money off and took it. So I'm sitting here saying to myself, okay, what do I do? You know, because everything's bad here. I can take this right now to my superiors, because what they all teach in CPA exams and in classes go a level above of where the fraud happens. So that's the president of my company. And one thing I need to add to this, the CFO had been with this company for 22 years. Okay, he's friends with the owners. They vacation together. Okay, so here I am, 1-year guy, not even 1 year, going in to tell the president of the company, your guy's stealing from you. Okay, they can do one of two things, or actually one of three things. They can fire me right then and say, you know what, we know about it. You know, it's not that big a deal. You know, I would have to quit then, because I'd already accused a guy of fraud. You know, so I'm either going to get fired, I'm going to have to quit, or they might do the right thing and they might, you know, take action against the guy and go somewhere else. But what I also saw was I was hired on a 5-year plan. This is 1 year into it. Okay, I don't have a lot of experience in this industry, so now I'm looking at my career path, saying I was on path to be a CFO. Now all of a sudden this happens. They could fire him. Are they going to hire above me? Okay, so now my career path could be done. So nothing is good here from my perspective. And I fretted it for a week. I called several colleagues of mine, one from J&J who had dealt with the fraud in the past, to get some advice. I talked to Ron Reed over here at UNC, and I talked to a couple other colleagues that I trusted. And at the end of the day, all came back with roughly the same ideas, the same feelings. It was, and I had to really come to grips with it. I was struggling. Should I wait and just monitor it? And if I did, they could come back on me and say, how long have you known about this if it got worse? They could take action against my license. I could lose my license. And the alternative was I can just go in and I could face all those other issues. I came to the conclusion it wasn't worth my livelihood for anybody. I didn't care what was out there. I didn't care what my job was. And keep in mind, this is the worst economy in our life. I might not be able to get another job. So I'm really struggling, losing weight, and really fretting this. Came to the conclusion it wasn't worth it. So I went straight to my HR director and said, this is what I'm going to do, and I want you there beside me because I want documentation of this. Presented it to my president. My CEO is kind of an absentee CEO. He's in Birmingham, Alabama a lot, and so he wasn't there. So I did this on a Friday afternoon. Sunday I get a call at my house from the CEO and president requesting my presence back at the office and at his condo to talk about it. So again, I'm shaking when I'm going in there, not knowing what's going to happen, and put it all out there again, and say I'm not an expert. That was one thing I came with talking to everybody, is that I'm not a forensic accountant. I'm not trained in that. I cannot make that decision if it's fraud or not, but I can tell you it is. You know, so but you can't trust me. You have to get your own opinion. You have to formulate the answer. And so I advised them to consult our outside auditors. I advised them to consult an attorney. And whatever they wanted me to do, I would do, even if that meant resigning. And they said, absolutely not. And we went straight from the condo of my CEO straight to the auditor. Went through the same presentation. They're like, yeah, it's fraud, but we're not forensics, so we need to get our forensic team on it. Well, that takes time, takes money, and said, I'm confident that this is fraud, but go to an attorney. So back across town we go. Now we're at an attorney's office. They're saying, what's this guy doing? You know, this risking $250,000 a year job for $2,000. It's fraud. They still weren't comfortable that they had made the right decision yet. So we went to another attorney and finally got 4 people on board. This is fraud. This is wrong. You need to do something about it. So here I am sitting here saying I've just basically been vindicated that this is accurate. Now I need to see what my employer's going to do. How are they going to handle my CFO? How are they going to handle me? And what they did was they told my CFO to go home for the day. They wanted to talk internally. They did so, and I wasn't part of these conversations. I didn't want to be a part of them. But the next morning, they escorted him to the door. Again, worked 22 years for this company. Was making $250,000 a year in salary and bonus. Vacationed with these guys, and they said, you know what? Here's the door. Okay. Again, they could have done numerous things from my perspective. They could have hired above me. And I would have been fine with that because that would have made sense because I was weak at the time for what they needed. They didn't. They came to me and said, okay, it's yours. You're running the ship. And the only response I basically had to them was I said, thank you for the vote of confidence, but because of my background, because of where I'm at in my career, you're going to have to be patient with me. I'm going to make mistakes, but at the end of the day, we're going to get to the right point. And basically their response to me was, we trust you. So they hitched their wagon to me, I've hitched my wagon to them, and hopefully, it'll be a good relationship in the future. But the only way that happens is making the right decision personally. I was selfish. I made the decision for me, and they made the decision for them. At the end, it intertwined and it matched, and I'm better off for that. We did not take legal action against this guy. We ultimately just parted ways with a separation agreement. He made off pretty well. But the first thing I did when I was hired as his successor was I went and hired the lady that he let go that had been looking at these accounts. She's 75 years old, great lady, and I said, just come in and reconcile this account. Tell me where we're at, what's the problem. We'd already separated, so there's no action we can take. But I just wanted to know. And she got it all in line and everything was kosher. But what was interesting, what struck me really interesting was about 6, 7, 8 months after that, my CEO, again, is absentee, but he's walking by, and she's kind of a secretary too, and just says thank you for everything to her. And she kind of looked at him and was like, was it condescending, or what? And what did he mean by that? And I said, no, he's absolutely thankful for what you did. Not because you broke up a friendship and a relationship, but because of you protected the company, because that's his livelihood. That's my livelihood. That's everybody's livelihood. And she said, well, is this all over now? Is it done? It's like, yeah, we can't do anything here. It's like, good, because I was afraid we were going to have to go back 20 years to see what was going on. Well, when she said that, that made me realize how big this could have been. And we were talking about $90,000 at one point. This could have been hundreds of thousands, if not millions, over 20 years. Okay? But again, we chose to make a clean break and move on. But the moral of that story is, you got a guy here who's got a great gig, and he risked it for $2,500. Right? I don't know what motivates people to do that, but what we've seen in our business is people do crazy stuff when they're desperate. Okay, the economy forces people to be desperate and make stupid decisions that they're going to regret later, but they do it for now. This guy, in my opinion, is a good person, made a bad choice. All right, he had a daughter that was had some substance abuse problems and couldn't stay in school, so he wanted to get her through college and had special schools and treatments. So he's spending like $10,000 a month. I found out after the fact. If he would have gone to our leadership and said, "I need help," they would have given it to him. He chose to go around the system and take matters in his own hands, and now he's without a job. Okay? That's difficult, but it's just as difficult when you're on the other side to make that decision and what it means to your career. Because, again, everything that I was seeing was bad. I was going to come out of this just as bad as anybody. But at the end of the day, it worked out okay. I speak of the economy because one of the things that I'm now seeing at our office, and we're currently going under, is more of an ethical thing. It's not necessarily fraud, but it's an ethical thing. And we had an employee who was a shareholder. He's a partner with all of us, standing beside you, and chose to leave our company and go to work not with a competitor. And we parted ways amicably, but part of my responsibility now is to protect company assets. So when anybody leaves, and y'all need to really understand this, your computers, you might hit delete, you might clean it out, it's still there. It never goes away. There's a timestamp on everything you do. Okay? When you're working at an employer's office, you send an email, I don't care if it's personal or on the company email, it goes through that server, we've got it. Okay? We can see it. So my responsibility then is to just just do a scan. So we scanned those emails, and we came up with an email that went to one of our competitors. And that in itself wasn't a big deal, but it forces me then to look at other things. So we looked at his computer. Normally we'd scrub it and give it to the next guy coming in. But we took it and we had our IT guy look at it. And again, because of that timestamp stuff, we found that he downloaded, before he left, the day he left, tons of confidential company information. Okay, stuff that dealt with pricing, our customers, our contracts, things that could damage us if it's in our competitors' hands. Okay, took it a step further, found out that he had a meeting with our competitor as a consultant. Now, if I'm our competitor, think about it like this. Think about it as a guy from Pepsi taking the Pepsi formula and going and trying to sell it to Coke. Now, Coke may very well want that information, but if they're ethical and they're smart, they would have said to that Pepsi guy, "Get the hell out of here. You know, I want you, get out of here." Okay, because not only are they holding themselves, that person's holding themselves out for recourse, so is the company. So now our competitor is in bed with a former employee that's stealing secrets, and there's laws in the state about trade secrets. So where it's become a problematic issue with our company is all we did was send a letter saying bring it back and don't do this. And it's escalated farther and farther down the line where we're going to probably have to take legal action and be in court. But one of the problem areas that we found is our own employees' personal beliefs. Okay, this is a guy, again, a friend, a partner. They're saying, "Why are you suing him?" Well, first off, we weren't suing him. We're just trying to get our information back. They don't understand it, and they're saying we're being the bad guy. Well, as an employee, as a partner, you need to understand that if those trade secrets get in the wrong hands and go to our competitor, we lose money. You could lose a job. You could lose a bonus. Okay, it affects everybody, even the ones that aren't partners, all the way down to the secretary or the janitor. When you explain it to them that way, they understand why we're doing what we're doing. And again, economy-wise, he had to leave our job because our business shrunk and he was tied to a commission. So we got a guarantee over here, and he was going to moonlight over on the other side with our competition. And again, we parted ways, we thought, very good, but he chose to sell his soul to the devil a little bit. That's an ethical choice. You know, what's right, what's wrong? I was telling the other class that I had to take a philosophy class here at UNC, part of my social arts or whatever they call it. And the professor the first day came in and flipped off the class. And we're just taken back saying, "What are you doing?" You know, and he's like, "Is that right or wrong? You know, what you think is right, you think is wrong." And I think it was Alan this morning said, you know, it's kind of the golden rule. You do unto others as you want to do unto you. That's the easiest way to look at it. But it goes deeper than that because you got so many varying different opinions. What matters to you doesn't matter to this other person. What's important to you is not important to that other person. But you really are faced with a lot of social issues in the workforce that you don't really know what you're even looking at until it kind of slaps you across the face. That's pretty much the experience I've got. I want to open up to some questions, but nothing that I got here or you know in my CPA training prepares you for this. You know, again, when I first saw the first perpetuation of fraud, you know, I didn't know what I was looking at. It took lots of time. This, you know, the light comes on, and this one was pretty blatant. But you've got everybody from, you know, an administrator that makes $100,000 risking that. I had an IT guy that was selling us computers, used computers, selling them, you know, through his brother's company, you know, as new. You know, he made an idiotic decision just to sell one to our president. Our president got a call from Microsoft saying you got pirated software on your computer. You know, at the end of the day, we found out that our IT guy was selling us refurbished computers that were worth $500 for $2,500 and pirating software on them. And he was splitting the profits with his brother. You know, common sense. You know, a lot of it is common sense. You know, you might think you're good, you're making a decision for today that helps you out today, but you're going to get caught. Now, a lot of things have happened. You know, in our industry, you know, we're self-regulated to a certain degree now. You know, we've got SOX, you've got the Public Company Oversight Board, and a lot of those things are a direct relation to fraud and ethics. You had Enron, you had Arthur Andersen, you had Enron and variable interest entities, and then they weren't valuing assets correctly. You know, that's fraud. You know, somebody is using that information to buy stock in that company. That's fraud. All right? it's our responsibility as accountants to be independent and objective and provide accurate information to people that make decisions. It doesn't matter if it's internal or external. We're a private company. Okay, we don't have a shareholder that's out on the open market, but I have a responsibility that's just as great to my owner as any other Johnson & Johnson does to their stockholder that's here in Greeley that owns 2 shares. And we've taken it on the chin, as an industry in the last few years, but ultimately it comes down to morals and ethics. And if you do the right thing, you'll be happy with yourself, you'll be happy with the result, and even if you're not happy with the result, I guarantee you that in the end, you'll be happy with what life gives you, because you can go to bed sleeping well at night. I can guarantee you, Bernie Madoff, was losing his hair long before he ever got questioned by the authorities. So. But anyways, that's kind of my spiel. I really wanted to share that with you guys, and I want to open it up to questions, any kind of questions about our business.
Before we start questions, if you came in late, make sure you get on the sign-up sheet. That's the way your faculty will know you were actually here. We'll get those sign-up sheets to all of the different faculty. So if you came in late, make sure you get signed up, and then let's have some questions.
Go ahead.
Is fraud that rampant in the entire corporate field, or is it just you're unlucky? I don't say fraud.
I think I'm unlucky. I mean, that's what I want to say. But where my company was at a disadvantage is you had a lot of, our company grew very fast, very large, very fast. We were a $25, $30 million company 10 years ago. Now we're 120. Think about your systems that are in place when you're a $20 million company now to 120. You had a lot of people that were there for 20, 30 years that are adverse to change, don't want to embrace technology, don't want to do things a different way. My boss had too much control, is what it came down to. I think genuinely he is a good person, made a bad choice. But when you have the ability to create a check, write a check, cash the check, and reconcile your account, he can do whatever he wants, all right? He can move it wherever he wants, and I'm not going to see that. If I'm not in charge of those accounts, I'm not going to see it because I'm looking at a big picture, and I'm dealing with $120 million. I'm not going to find $2,000. There's just no way. That doesn't even show up on my radar. And where it's very difficult is back, when I came out of school, I was to the penny accountant. And part of me is still there. I'm a very anal retentive accountant, but in this job, because it's so big and you're dealing with so many dollars, you have to think about materiality and where it comes into play. I think in a smaller business it's harder to conceal fraud. In a larger one, it's very easy to probably perpetuate it. But again, there's certain things you got to look at. Is that person taking any vacation time? Are they working odd hours? Does the person have a lifestyle that doesn't support his salary doesn't support? If you got a $70,000 a year employee that's driving a fancy car, got a boat, got a house on the beach, maybe his folks are rich. I don't know, but you got to ask the question. Something doesn't seem right. You got to ask those questions. What we were doing in a little bit, whether it's right or wrong, we asked our auditors to test certain areas more than they normally would. We had problems in certain areas. We'd say test them harder, ask the question, go to different people, so maybe they could find it. An auditor's responsibility is not to detect fraud. It's just to give you a reasonable assurance that they didn't see anything. We were kind of leaning on them to help us find it, and got to a point where we did. What else? We got some time to kill, guys. So, yeah, go ahead.
My question is, what if I'm a CIS major that came to me accounting fraud in my company? So it's not my duty or my specialty to investigate this or to...
No, not at all. You're not an expert in that. What it's your response? If you think it's there?
Yeah, I'm sure it's there.
If you're...
Because my limited knowledge of accounting is there. But if I report it, I might embarrass the auditing department or accounting.
No, you won't.
And raise some enemies, and CFO would say, it's not your responsibility, it's not your duty, you're embarrassing the company.
Yeah, the simplest response to that is I would resign tomorrow. Do you want to work for that company if that's what their morals and ethics are? That's the type of person you're working for. I wouldn't want to associate myself with that, because at some point it's going to come back and it will bite them and it will take that company down, or a lot of people down with it. Do you want to be a part of that? if you work for the right person, that will not embarrass anybody. They will be thankful for it. Now, you're not an expert. Any accountant is not an expert, okay? Unless you're a forensic accountant, which, by the way, they make tons of money doing what they do. But unless you're an expert in that area, you have to defer that to somebody who is. So it's your responsibility to say, hey, here's the information I'm seeing. It doesn't look right. It's your decision now. I've washed my hands clean. It's your decision on how you handle it. Then it's up to you if that's acceptable or not. You know, they're going to do whatever they want to do, all right? But it's up to you then to say, you know what, they did the right thing, or no, they didn't. And if they didn't, in your eyes, is that somebody you want to work for?
What if it's like only place you want to go?
I'm sorry, say that again?
You don't have many choices.
I can totally relate.
Being in that place or being unemployed. Like,
I know.
it happens to me once, and simply they transfer me to another one just to get the headache out.
Yeah. Again, that's an ethical dilemma that you have to be comfortable with personally. I face that because I could have easily been fired, and it was the worst economy that we'd ever been through as well. So that's a very difficult choice that you personally have to make. But again, if you do nothing and stay there, how is it impacting you? I mean, it can impact not only you, it can impact your entire organization. Again, down to the janitor, you know, because of the money that's could potentially be going out of that institution. Very difficult question, only one that you can answer. I can tell you what I would do. You know, I would give them the information. I would put it on the table and say, I'm not an expert. This is what I think. If you got to be sure. I mean, if you're positive that that's what's saying, it's very easily to say, hey, you know what, this is it. If you feel that I'm wrong, you know, I have no problem transferring or resigning. That's a decision you have to make. But if you're right, they better be the type of people that are thankful for you for what you did. If they're not, I don't think you're working for very good people. Yeah.
You had mentioned that you went to HR before talking to
I did.
CEO. Is that always a good course of action to involve
Yeah.
HR before you go up the ladder?
I think it is because you protect yourself. HR is forced to document every conversation like that you have when it relates to payroll or personnel matters, and that way it can't be disputed what you said, how you said it. You know, because what can happen is then you're protecting yourself from any potential litigation that you might endure because of your actions. I would always, you know, HR with any kind of personnel issue. You know, for instance, if I need to sit an employee down and talk about performance, I need to have HR there, because if it's just me and the employee, it never happened. It's me versus them. But if you have HR there, they're supposed to be neutral. They're supposed to be there, an advocate for the employee on both sides. I highly recommend that.
Did you have, in your situation, I'm sure HR was probably there for a long time as well.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have an ethical or a dilemma with whether or not you felt you could trust HR?
In a roundabout way, because we're small, and that person was hired by my former boss, and that person worked for my former boss. You know, I'm in charge of HR now, and I've been there for 7 years. So there's a personal trust there. There's a friendship, camaraderie there. Yeah, absolutely. But when I put everything on the table, that person said, "What the hell is he doing?" You know, I mean, if you can present it very, and it's ironclad. I mean, you're not the expert to make the decision. It's somebody higher and more knowledgeable that's an expert in that area. What are they going to do? I mean, they can't say you're full of crap. It's right there. Okay. If they wind up using that forensic or they use that attorney, they can't realistically do that. And if they do you want to work for that company? And that's kind of my thought. At the end of the day, I wasn't really willing to risk my livelihood for anybody. I don't know if I've already said it in here, but they said that, I read a deal somewhere, they said 10 to 20% more earnings by having a CPA versus not. Okay, over your lifetime. Well, look over your lifetime. That's a lot of money. I'm just not willing to risk that for anybody. You know, I don't think anybody should.
Yep, I know, but let's see if they're still friends outside.
I know that our CEO called him and congratulated him on a new job that he got. But I think for the most part, the other guy's pretty embarrassed, that my former CFO, that he got to that point, and so he's kind of cut off ties. Again, I don't think he's a bad person. I think he made a bad choice. And when you look at where his life was at, I told you about his daughter. His wife came from money. He had she was expecting a livelihood that I would think on $250,000 a year you could provide, but he couldn't. And I think that put him in a box where he felt like he had to do what he had to do. But again, people make those decisions every day, and you make that today, it satisfies your need today, but it penalizes you forever. He didn't get charged for anything, but that'll follow him forever. The guy at J&J who did get charges filed, he'll never get another job. I mean, think about when you guys go out and you got to say, are you a convicted felon? Think about somebody that's in charge of any kind of money getting a job if they're a convicted felon. Not going to happen. Not going to happen. So else? You guys talk to me about anything. Teachers aren't here, so if you want career advice, whatever.
After the incident, did you get any harassment threats?
Not so much harassment or threats, but keep in mind, I've been there for a year. He'd been there for 20. Lots of people had been in this organization for a long time. Again, friends and family, really. And it was difficult because I couldn't say anything. I basically had to keep my mouth shut and say, I don't know what's going on. John left for another opportunity. But where it becomes difficult is it has the appearance that they hired you to kick him out, when you've only been there for a year or two. Now, had I been there for 6, 7, 8 years, that would have been a different story, But I hadn't been there long enough, so I got a little bit of that. But just with anything, when you prove your worth at any level, even dissenters will come back to your side and see the value that you bring to the table. When I was hired on, I was hired because of a lack of confidence in their accounting staff. They grew so fast that the accountant that was there couldn't absorb it. So it was the appearance, hey, I'm hired to fire her. Okay, well, when we went through layoffs, I had to fire her. I had to lay her off. So the appearance, again, was I was hired to fire her. That's very challenging and very difficult to get through. Sometimes you have to sit people down and actually just have a candid discussion about that. It's challenging. Yeah, man.
All right, so that guy who'd been there for 20 years got fired over $2,000.
Mm-hmm.
I guess, because I probably would have handled it a little different. I mean, if it was one of my friends, I'd have been like, $2,000, no big deal. But when you're, like, from a legal standpoint, do you even have the choice to handle it in-house, or
you can,
or do you have to fire?
No, you don't. It's a choice, okay. But I didn't want to make that choice. I didn't want to go to my boss. Keep this in mind. He is my boss. He is perpetuating the fraud. I could have gone to him and said, "Hey, I see this. What are you doing? Don't do it. Fix it. Move on. I won't speak a word of it." I could have done that, okay. But at the same time, I risk my career. If he wants to then say, "You know what? You're just not working out."
No, I don't mean should you have. I mean, like,
should they have?
CEO, should the CEO
they could have.
Them, or could they have?
They easily could have just talked to him, and that was one of the choices that they could have made. I was thinking that they could have said, "Hey, we talked to our CFO. Everything's fine. We're all on the same page. They're going to take care of it. We're moving on." At that point, I'm sitting here saying, "Okay, I was the one that went to my superiors above him. My CFO knows I did that. So how is my work environment going to be now? How is my boss going to treat me? Do I have that career progression to CFO now? Am I going to get fired?" All those things are my questions. So when I was looking at it, I basically picked what I felt was the best scenario for everybody involved, what made the most sense, and put my faith in my employers to do what I thought they should. Obviously, they had tons of choices. They didn't have to fire him. They didn't have to consult anybody. They could have just said, "Yeah, it's fine. We understand it." But they didn't, and I'm glad they didn't. Yeah. How much time we got left, guys? I'm sure we got 15, 20 minutes, don't we? All right, so all you guys, accounting majors? I know you're CIS, but mostly accounting? Okay. You'll struggle with a lot of ethical dilemmas in your careers. Just even personally, you'll struggle with a lot of that. And it's really I think it's common sense. I really just think it's common sense. How do you handle that is probably the difficult part. You can always say, this is what I want to do, this is what I feel like I should do, but how do you do it? Seek advice. It doesn't matter if you're a first-year staff or a 10-year CPA. It doesn't matter. Seek advice. I'm continually calling people when I don't know the answer to something. You got to know what you don't know. But unless you ask the questions, you're just going to be dead in the water, and you could make some really bad decisions. One of the questions I got in the last class was, I was in public accounting and got out and went to private, and is fraud seen, more prevalent in, private versus public, or, small business, big business? And I would say that it kind of depends. What I saw, I didn't really see a lot of this in public accounting because I wasn't there very long in a position to know it. But at J&J, it's such a big company. I mean, it's a top 5 company in the world, and you're not going to find $100. You're not going to find $1,000. I mean, I remember when I was negotiating my salary, my mother just gave me the business because I was asking for like $5,000 more. And she said, "Are you kidding? They're giving you a great deal. You take this and run." And I was like, if I'm the right guy, that's like a penny to Johnson & Johnson. If I'm the right guy, they'll pay that. And that's kind of the point. They would never see that. If you're the right person, they would hire you. But at the same time, if you're perpetuating fraud, they'll never see that. So controls at a major company, IT-wise, I think this is probably a huge advantage to computer people that accountants really don't have, is setting up those controls so you can grow large and you can place reliance on technology. Our company was $25 million 10 years ago, and they were doing, when I walked in, they were still doing the old journal paper. You guys ever seen those? Where they got the 2 columns? Yeah, they were still doing that. That's a problem. Adversity to change is a problem. Willingness to accept technology and use it to your advantage is beneficial. Is definitely beneficial, and it'll help everybody. Helps productivity, and it cuts down on the potential. Now, you're never going to get away from fraud. There's always somebody that's going to be able to do it, and very few times will you find it's a single person fraud. You'll find that it's a collusion type where you got 1, 2, 3, 4 people. One of the questions I got in the last class was, what did you guys do different now that this guy's not there? Well, I still can sign a check. I can still do a check request, but the difference is it goes across 2 other desks before it goes out the door. Okay? So somebody else sees it. My former CFO had the ability to go online to his accounts, to our corporate accounts, and do a wire to his personal account, which he did. Okay? Now I can still do that, but there's 5 different email accounts set up on those accounts. So whenever I do something like that, president, CEO, CFO, accounting manager, HR, all know it. Protect yourself. Yeah.
Are those controls set up by you, or are they set up by like IT, or
both? Both. It's a request, really, and a lot of it comes from our auditors. They I talk about this nastygram that I get, and it's a requirement under Sarbanes-Oxley. It's trickled down, to all the small businesses, and they come in and they test internal controls, and they test IT, they'll test accounting, they'll test HR, and they really beat down on it. And they'll say, hey, you got a problem right here. And so what happens is the auditor then will focus more of their efforts in that area to be sure that they're okay. Whereas if this is perfectly controlled by their standards, there's no risk over there. So those are the areas that the auditors will identify, if we haven't already, that we'll address, and we'll go from there. Come on, guy. All right.
Is there such a thing as small fraud?
No.
Like when do you, where do you draw lines?
Well, I would say that had I only saw $2,000 and I didn't see this $90,000 receivable over here and all the other activity, I never would have said probably a thing about it. I probably would have gone to my CFO and said, hey, listen, this doesn't look right. I probably would have played it off and saying, I don't understand this. Is this a mistake? You know, it just doesn't look right. And I guarantee you probably would have fixed it. Okay? But with the presence of the receivable and the checks over here and seeing everything and just kind of pulling it all together, you're kind of building a house, if you will. You know, you got little bits and pieces, but you don't have a house yet until you put the roof on and all that stuff. Well, when he made that entry, he put the roof on the house, and I can tell you what it is. And you know, when you're just digging some dirt to build the foundation, you don't really have a whole lot at that point. And if it was only $2,000 at that point, I probably would have just questioned him. But because I had all that other information, I couldn't do that. All right, guys. What do you guys see the job market is like for you guys? I'm going to switch gears on y'all. Is it crappy because of the economy? Struggling? I don't know. When I came out, very similar to where you guys are at, but it was the economy was rough. But when I came out, pretty much you had to be a top 1 or 2 student to get a Big Six at the time, Big Six job, and so a lot of us had to. I obviously was not. I was a baseball player and majored in drinking and chasing women. So I was a BC student, had to work for everything I got, and when I got lucky to get a job at McGladder & Pullen. But there's not a doubt in my mind that it was the hard work when I finally realized why I was here. The last year or two when I've actually studied and passed the exam and worked hard with my employers. Every employer I've left 2 of them, and I'm still on speaking terms with all of them. I even utilize them as resources. Try to build as much relationships as you can throughout your career, because you will use those people no matter what industry you're in. You'll use those people for the rest of your life. In this scenario, I contacted Reed here to get his advice. I contacted my former boss at Johnson & Johnson to get his advice. I contacted my former boss at McGladder & Pullen to get his advice, and then a colleague of mine that I had worked with that I trusted is actually a UNC grad as well. So those are the people that I relied on. You're not going to be able to do that just every day, just inside your own shell at your company or your firm. You're going to need people outside that you trust, and it doesn't necessarily have to be in the same industry. These were all accountants, but I was dealing with a specific issue about my license. But you're going to be forced with these all the time. You know, these dilemmas, and it's how you answer those questions, how you handle those is going to kind of dictate what type of person you are, and how people will associate with you in the future, and how far your career will go. You see a lot of these big dogs that you're in the newspaper, they're getting arrested. You know, they got there for a reason. They lied, cheated, and stealed, and they're paying the price for it now. I assume that they enjoyed it while it lasted, but if you ask any of them now, would they give it all up because they're going to lose their freedom? I guarantee you they would. I'd say I'd rather be poor than have my freedom than be rich for 2 years and be in jail for the rest of my life. And that's what a lot of these people are facing. Go ahead.
So did talking to other people that change your decision, or just kind of solidify?
I don't know if it really changed it, but it definitely solidified it. I was subscribing at the time to let me see if it happens again. So kind of I know it's there. I know it's happening. Just watch it, and the next time it happens, then blow the whistle. But what it came down to is I did some research, and I found that if I did that, and 3 months from now, it didn't matter what the entry was, if it was $50,000 or $500, and I took that to my superiors, they could ask the question, how long have you known about it? If I say I found out about it this week, or I found out about it 6 months ago, what do you think the response is? Okay, their response could be really adverse to me, and I found that they could take action against my license at the state level, and I could be censored or lose my license. And when that happens, you get put in the State Society CPA always has actions against CPAs, and it's always in there. whether it's a suspended license, a censorship, whatever it is, everybody in this state would my name would be right there if they got that ornery. And I didn't. Again, it's not a risk I want to take, because if you're an accountant and every CPA gets that magazine, how am I going to get a job? You know, if they do their homework, I wouldn't. So, very tough. Well, the reason I asked you guys about the job market, because it was very tough at the time when I came out. Obviously, different reasons, but my company is starting to grow again. We downsized tremendously, but you're going to probably see something from my company. And I didn't know what Power Motive was when I hired on, so I didn't expect any of you guys to know. But we're going to be looking for somebody for the summer, internship full-time, and then turn into a full-time job after that, probably in September. So we're starting to grow again. We want to build some bench strength and start here. So you'll probably see it in another week or two. Don't know where that'll go, but hopefully it'll be before you guys check out for the summer. So if you guys have any questions, you can all come up here and I'll give you my card. But guys, that's all I had. I don't want to cut you out too early, but
You're fine.
okay. But if you guys have any questions you didn't want to answer or ask here, you can ask me. I'll give you my card, or you can ask me privately. But thank you guys very much for letting me come in and talk to you. I appreciate it.